Welcome to Corona in Texas, a virtual event series from the Texas Tribune. I'm Abby Livingston, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. While the Tribune has paused our in-person live events, we're moving the conversation online with an ongoing series of virtual interviews. I'm here today with Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, who represents Texas's 29th Congressional District based in Houston, and we'll be discussing the federal response to the coronavirus outbreak and what relief Texans can expect until about 12:45 Central Time this afternoon. Congresswoman Garcia and I will be going over questions submitted by our readers throughout the conversation. First, we want to thank our sponsors for supporting today's conversation: AT&T, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas, and Texas 2036. We also want to thank KPRC2 and KXAN for their media support. Though donors and corporate sponsors underwrite our events, they play no role in determining the content, panelists, or line of questioning. All right, let's get started. So Congresswoman Garcia is currently serving her first term representing Texas's congressional district, where she is one of the two first Latinas to represent Texas in the U.S. Congress. She sits on the House Judiciary and Financial Services Committees. Previously, she served as a director and presiding judge of the Houston Municipal System, as Houston City Controller, as a Harris County Commissioner, as well as a state senator. And she's gone in the history books this year as one of the House impeachment managers during the impeachment of President Donald Trump. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Abby, it's good to see you, and it's good to be visiting with Texas Tribune, and thank you for doing this. I think it's a great way to touch base with a lot of people and provide some really solid information. So thank you all for doing this.
So my first question, I think, has become a new cultural norm. When you speak to someone you haven't talked to in a while, the question is, how are you doing amid this pandemic? And what is a day in the life of a member of Congress in lockdown?
Well, I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. And of course, my biggest concern is immediately is my family. And we have had one family member that early on was very, very sick, and in fact was in critical care, and we almost lost her. And they, in fact, thought it was the virus, but it was not. She tested negative, but she continues to have a lot of medical challenges, and it's still in the hospital. So that has been a big worry for me. My sister, that's been, and she's now in a long-term care facility. But it reminded me of the article that you all did in the Texas Tribune, how, people who were in hospitals who perhaps were not there for the coronavirus treatment and had some other things, it kind of delayed some of the treatment and perhaps some of the attention that she should have gotten. But we're blessed that she's now in a long-term care facility, and she may be out in about a month. But for me, it's been about family. My brother, the first week of the stay-at-home order, was laid off. He's works for an energy-related company. I have probably a dozen nieces and nephews, not only here in Texas, but in California and other places that have lost their jobs. Most recently, my niece, that's a doctor in Fort Bend County, got laid off. And that one was just one that really dumbfounded me, because I thought, oh my gosh, when even doctors are being laid off. I mean, this is getting more and more serious every day. So as we see the numbers climb in unemployment, of course, across the country, 30 million, here in Texas, 1.5 million, and it touches you and so many other families, then you know that we've got to do more from Washington to help the average working family, because people are really hurting, and that's what we need to focus on.
So what can we expect ahead in May in Congress dealing with this? Will we see another $1 trillion bill come through? Where are we headed?
Well, I think we're going to have to do another relief package, because, again, when you look at what we've done, and we passed 4 bills totaling somewhere close to $3 trillion. It focused on research. It focused on the protective equipment. It focused on testing. It's focused on unemployment insurance, the supplement. It's focused on the stimulus check, the direct payment to people. It's focused on everything that's so interconnected before we can put the economy back together. But it's not still enough. I mean, the stimulus check was for one time only. Fortunately for us in Texas, almost 8 million people have already gotten it. But it was one time. The supplemental $600 for the unemployment was for 4 months. And this is going quickly. I mean, today is May 1st. I remember when we left mid-March, I thought, God, how long it would take. Maybe we'll be back to normal in May. But no, we're not back to normal. So I think we're going to have to face some challenges, Abby. I think we'll still have to social distance, and we'll probably have to vote in groups like we did this last time. We'll probably have to wear our masks. Some of us wear gloves. We'll probably still have to do that. There'll have to be some adjustments physically in the hearing rooms for us to be able to sit, but not next to each other. And as you know, some of those hearing rooms are small. And we may or may not be able to have that many people as visitors watching the hearings. And I kind of worry about the public input that we need visiting us and coming to talk to us about their concerns. So we're going to have to make some changes. We're not quite ready yet for remote voting. As you know, it requires some rule changes. It requires maybe some upgrades to technology. It requires, an infrastructure to be able to get that done. I think the speaker is committed to allow for proxy voting. But we still have to vote on that too. So it's going to change the way we do business. And I can tell you, this last time when we were there to vote on this fourth package, it was really kind of eerie. As we were all kind of going single file, but 6 feet apart from each other. Some of us were going in to vote. Some of us were coming back where we're all in masks. It was very quiet and it was very, very solemn. It kind of, remind you about how serious the situation is and how much we really still need to do for the American people. Because in my mind, we should stop at nothing. There's nothing we should not do. For testing, for making sure people have the basic necessities of life, of food and shelter and a good job, and to make sure that when we go back to work or to church or to school or to play, that we can feel that we're not at risk, that the person sitting next to us may be contagious, or that the person next to us is still should be on quarantine. So we still have a long way to go.
So one of the questions I have as I've been watching this, and it's really hard to grasp what $1 trillion is. And
a lot of zeros.
It's a lot. And so we've seen the Democratic primary, the presidential, was so much about expanding entitlements. The Republican world is all about continuing to cut taxes. How is Congress capable of paying for this after the fact when things are good again? How do we pay for this?
Well, we're just going to have to find a way to do it. I mean, I don't think that we should stop because we need to worry about that. Of course, we will worry about it, but I think it's important. It's no different than your household. If there's an emergency in your home, and all of a sudden you're faced with a major expense, especially if it's someone sick, catastrophic illness, or some contagious disease. The first thing we do is we pull out the credit cards and say, we'll take care, let's take care of it and then we'll figure it out later. That's almost what we're facing as a government. But we'll have to look at what we might be able to tweak in terms of to make sure that we get the revenues to be able to pay our debt. We'll have to make sure that we look at industry and what we're doing and what we should be doing differently. So I think we can get it done. We always have. But I think, again, to save people's lives, and if it's a question between death or debt, I'm going to choose debt because I think it's more important to make sure we protect all Americans and that we make sure that we minimize the number of deaths. We've already had too many. I mean, just think, Texas had its worst day yesterday. I think there was like 40 deaths yesterday. That is a lot. But New York and other cities across the country are facing it even worse. So we've got to find a way to I call it the 3 Ps: testing, tracing, and then treatment. Until we get that done and can satisfy the American public that we can keep them safe, we need to keep going to protect everyone.
And so my next question is from Texas Tribune reader Elizabeth. Are we going into the next Great Depression?
I'm one of those that kind of thinks we're already in the middle, already into it. No one's actually declared it that yet. But if you look at the numbers of unemployment, if you look at the number of small businesses that are closing and may not reopen, when you're looking at companies that are already beginning to do all the major layoffs and the restructuring. I'm waiting for the bankruptcies to start. And unfortunately, some of those may even be our local governments, our smaller cities, if we don't give them any help. That was a big point of disagreement with Leader McConnell. We thought this package should have had some help for local governments because they've had to step in where in some areas the federal government has failed them, and it's stretching their budgets. And again, it's a question of, do we let small governments go bankrupt, or do we let them not fire police and firefighters and garbage collectors? Well, then what's going to happen to cities? We cannot let them crumble. We cannot let them go bankrupt. So again, it goes back to one of your original questions. We will have to do more, and I predict there will be another package, and that'll be CARES 2. And if you look at the trend, we've done 4 bills. They're all coming like every 2 to 3 weeks. That means when we go back, that is something we're going to face.
So my next question is from Texas Tribune reader Francis. At what point will adequate testing take place for COVID-19 in all communities? Is there sufficient bipartisan support for widespread adequate testing?
Well, I think if you... I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody does. I think there's still a real lack for testing. And unfortunately, here in Texas, depending on which day of the week we look, we're either number 49 out of 50 states in per capita testing. I think yesterday we were at 47. So we're always at the bottom fighting for 47, 48, 49, or 50, which is a sad state of affairs, especially when you see that, we're opening today. But yet we don't have enough tests. I know here in Houston, it's still a challenge. I know in back home in parts of South Texas, where I'm originally from, that's still a challenge. And I think that we're just not doing the number of tests in Texas. Now, when we'll get there, it's all about funding. Once again, when you look at the proposal that was presented by Leader McConnell and Republicans, this last package, they did not include testing. That was something that the negotiators from the House insisted on, and we added the additional $25 billion. So we got to make sure that before we really go into a full economy, that we can have a test for everyone that needs one or everyone that wants one, because everyone has to go back, I'll say it again, to church, to work, to play, to school, knowing that they're safe and that they're comfortable, and that if somebody needs a test to get that comfort level, that they can get one.
And so you alluded to it earlier. What is your reaction to Governor Abbott's decision to reopen the state? And in a larger picture, what is your reaction to the rhetoric you've heard from state officials about the imperative of opening the economy versus the health of the citizens of Texas?
Well, I'm just... as I said yesterday to another reporter, I was just baffled that he was ready to do that. Because again, when you look at where we are in testing, so far behind in the state, we're just not quite ready. When you see that even yesterday we had all those record number deaths, we're number 48 or 49. There's still a lot of cities, especially the urban cities, are concerned. We have the jail population in Harris County having so many positive tests. We have the Texas prison system having so many positive. We're having ICE detention centers with so many positive. It just didn't make sense to me. I think it's too early. I'm concerned that it's going to cause us to have a relapse, which may be even worse. So I think people need to be cautious. They need to continue to wash their hands. They need to continue to watch their symptoms. And they have to continue to wear their masks. I mean, the mask order is still in place in Harris County. There's a mask order in other counties and other cities across the state. That does not change. So I think they should be very careful. And if they go to a restaurant or a mall, follow the rules and keep the distancing, even if doesn't appear like they're enforcing it, or if they don't have the markers for you the way they do at some of the grocery stores. You do the right thing. You need to do what you need to do to protect yourself and your family. And it does begin with you. So please, you can go to some of the places that the governor says are open, but take care and be precautious about everything you do.
So the next question comes from Tribune reader Brian. And so you're a boss, and businesses are opening up now in Texas. When will your district offices be open for your constituents?
Well, we're going to try to figure that out for next week. I, for one, am more than anxious. I'll be perfectly frank with you. I'm not used to a lot of the technology, and I'm not used to a lot of the things that I've got to do on my own now, being here solo. And I know people are feeling that. And I might add that I know there's some people that are getting more than cabin fever. They're getting, there's a little anxiety, there's a little frustration, and even some depression. So people have to not be ashamed of talking about that, and they need to get out and take a stroll, or go outside, or go for a walk, or talk to more friends on the phone. We've all got to do something. So we're gonna work out a plan. For now, we were told that we would not be going back to Washington probably till another week. But we're on hold because, remember, the district has its own rules, and all the cities around us, Baltimore and others, have their rules of stay at home and how, whether or not you can congregate. And so it's not just about me getting to work. It's about all the staff on Capitol Hill, the security guards, our staff. They come from all those surrounding cities. So we're going to be hard pressed to ask people to come to work if their city has a stay-at-home order. So that between the treating physician and the sergeant at arms and our leadership, they got to balance all those things and decides. And usually whatever the Capitol office does, the district office does. So we're going to have to wait and see.
So I've spent a lot of this time writing about the Paycheck payment or Paycheck Protection Program, which is a small business fund meant to basically give forgivable loans to keep small businesses open and keep people employed. And I come to this question with a base assumption that everyone in this, Republican and Democrat, had the best of intentions, and it has been a very difficult process. And what I noticed when I was making calls about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, some small business owners told me, hey, my banker's been in touch. He's been updating me daily about the rules, the interpretation of the rules. And then I talked to other small business owners who couldn't even get a bank person on the phone to answer a question that could disqualify their application on a technicality. That I don't think was the intent of this, but that is what has happened. And we've seen some some companies and business people get, essentially the metaphor I've used, big kids playing in the kiddie pool. Very, very large corporations, based on how the law was written, that thousands of employees work for these companies and they're getting small business loans. The next pass of this legislation that you guys put through, I've lost my sense of time, a week ago, it earmarked some money for smaller businesses, smaller lending institutions, nonprofit groups. We don't have much transparency on this. I'm asking you as a member of Congress, have you seen any evidence that this money has gone to good effect to the very small business owners, the ones who are not connected, and minority business owners?
Well, Abby, I think you're absolutely right. I think the first round, if you will, may not have gone to where we intended it to go. I think if you poll any member of Congress, they will tell you we meant small business. And small business, we mean neighborhood businesses around us, the mom and pops, the people who have 100 or employees or less, 500 or less. We did not mean national change and publicly traded companies. We just didn't mean any of that. So that's why we did the carve out. And the numbers I saw recently do show that so far they did total about $90 billion worth, and that 61% of those loans now are going to small banks, coming from small banks. And the size of the loans are under 100,000, I believe. So it looks like it's working. Unfortunately, however, we may run out of money today. And again, that just underscores the point that you asked earlier. We will probably have to do another package. I know Chairman Waters and the Financial Services Committee has talked about this at length. I think she's going to be recommending that we do a $1 trillion and go all to small businesses, and that we lay out and carve out and make sure that the smaller businesses, the under 100s, the under 50s, also get support, and that we get the community banks, the credit unions, the smaller institutions, the ability to also process the loans, because that's what matters. You're not going to get one of my neighborhood restaurants who's going to be with a JP Morgan Chase. They're going to use one of our smaller community banks. So we got to make sure we connect it all. And remember, this is a payroll protection program. It's meant to protect payroll. That means workers. That means people getting more money in their pocketbook. And that's our goal. The stimulus check that we sent was to put money in people's pocketbook. This payroll protection program is about putting money in people's pocket because their payroll dollars are protected. So it's about taking care of people. And of course, that was the main goal of our proposals, is to put people first to help working families get through this crisis.
So you mentioned you had a family member in a long care facility at the outset. And is there any role for the federal government to play in dealing with this problem that the virus is just ravaging those facilities?
I think we almost will have to step in, Abby, if all the states don't provide the information and aren't transparent about what is going on, and not do a better job of enforcing all of the health inspection rules and that they're supposed to do at these nursing homes, long-term care facilities, the homes at I know I have a friend who's got his disabled brother at a home here outside of Richmond. And he was tested positive. Anytime you have a congregate bunch of people living somewhere, it'll spread. And if the states don't do what they should, and it's regrettable, and it's almost shameful that our governor just won't release the numbers of how many deaths are coming from nursing homes. People have a right to know those things. And it wasn't until, I guess, when he had his press conference that we even got more numbers of deaths, because he just wasn't giving us the data. So that's why, when he decided to reopen, it was like, you keep saying you relied on data and doctors, but aren't showing us the data. And to this day, I don't know that he's released that. So I think we may have to, if we see that the states aren't doing it. And we do in some areas. But I think we're going to have to make sure that we do more, because again, it's all about the health and safety of all of the people of this country.
On another industry that's been hit by this, you addressed in a letter as a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Is there a role for the federal government to play in the meatpacking industry and the similar situation we're seeing there?
Well, again, I think it starts with state regulations in terms of the health code, and I think everyone's going to have to relook and rethink and rewrite their regulations, because we've got to be prepared for a pandemic like this. It's almost like, Abby, most of these facilities have to file with inspectors and with a local or state authority, a disaster plan. What would you do to evacuate? Well, I think we're going to have to start requiring, a pandemic plan. What are you going to do? And quite frankly, I would have hoped that the governor would have required that of all our major companies before they could open. Tell us what you plan to do. Not just set a checklist. I don't know if you've seen his plan. It's just a series of checklists for every sector. They should have submitted that in advance so that they could get approval as to whether or not they were doing all the accommodations and changes in their facilities. So again, if we see that states are not doing it, of course we're going to have to. We cannot put all those people at risk in terms of the disease, and risk that it may contaminate any of the food in any way, maybe not with this virus or another virus. And we got to make sure that we don't, disrupt the supply chain. Because when you see the meat packing and the poultry packing plants having this issue, it may disrupt the supply later down the road, and we're going to see a shortage. So it's all interconnected, and if we have to step in, we're going to have to.
So, you're a former state senator. Looking ahead, how in the world do you imagine the state of the legislature dealing with this when they have to draw the next budget? And where does the federal government play into that?
Well, if you listen to Dan Patrick, he's willing to sacrifice his life for the future of economy for his grandchildren. Then you're looking at a governor who, quite frankly, I'm not sure. All the data and all the experts that he listened to reopen, I'm just, it makes me nervous. But I'm confident that with public pressure and pressure from the media and everything that we can, that they'll do the right thing. I would hope that the governor decides to use the rainy day fund sooner rather than later to help meet any of the economic impact to the state's budget, to make sure that the schools in particular have everything that they need. I'm very concerned, Abby, that we've got so many children at home, and many of them, particularly I know in my district, that don't have the laptops to be keeping up with any classes. And even if they do, they always relied going to the library to use the Wi-Fi, but now they can't go to the library. So this whole notion that everything is fine because the kids are homeschooling, is maybe half true, because probably half the kids don't even have the laptop or the hotspot to be able to keep up with school. So I hope that the governor uses the money that we sent to Texas in the last, not this last bill, but the third bill for education, earmarked for hotspots and technology for schools, that he uses that. But if it runs short, that he dig into that rainy day fund to make sure that the schools can open when it's appropriate, and that we do everything in the schools to modify the classrooms, modify the cafeterias, and do whatever we need to do to prepare for any opening in the fall. Because I don't know how much longer our parents can go on being told you can go back to work, but then you still are being told you've got to stay home and take care of your kids. So we got to help working families, and we got to make sure that we take care of all of our children.
So I want to turn to the other crisis in the state, which is the price of oil. And I like to sometimes illustrate to readers and viewers each congressional district. And if my lines are correct, your district is the site of the movie Urban Cowboy, which was about refinery workers. And when you drive on the freeway in your district in Pasadena, you can see the lights of the refineries. This is a major component of the economic livelihood of your constituents. What does a member of Congress do in this situation?
Well, I try not to panic, okay? The challenge here is that the oil prices were already sluggish and struggling a little bit even before the pandemic. I think the pandemic just made it a little bit worse. And I have never seen the price of oil go to zero into a negative, where we have a challenge with storage and we have to literally pay someone to buy the oil. And it's already impacting. We already have a lot of layoffs from all of the industry. And as I related earlier, my brother, because he's in the oil energy related field, was the first one in my family to get laid off that very first week. Regrettably, it took him 2 weeks to get through the system over at the Workforce Commission for him to even apply for unemployment. But that's another story. So I think we're going to continue to have those challenges. And I'm frankly very worried because There is so much activity related to energy in my district because it's up and around the Houston Ship Channel. And, my district has almost all of the petrochemical complex. It will impact jobs in my district. And we already have enough unemployment without more coming. And it's, those jobs are good jobs that has provided a middle class for my district, that we will not be able to replace those jobs. So we have a lot of work ahead of us in the energy sector, and I'm doing everything I can in Congress to be supportive. And I've touched base with some of the energy sector. I've touched base with the Federal Reserve Bank president here in the Dallas region and gotten a briefing from him on the whole energy sector. So I think the energy sector will be hit not only this quarter, but even next quarter and into the first quarter of next year.
I've been doing a lot of reading and learning about the oil bust in the 80s in Houston, and it went from one of the biggest municipal disputes was people taking helicopters into downtown because they were so rich and wanted to avoid traffic, to entire neighborhoods became ghost towns in Houston. Are you worried? Is the Houston economy diversified enough to avoid that kind of dramatic swing?
I think that we have, and I think that's why we've been able to kind of get through this change in oil prices, because manufacturing trade is much higher now than it was then. Everything in terms of the medical field, the medical center, and its huge growth. So I think there's, even among the energy sector, you're seeing more renewable and alternative energies. So I think we've done a better job than we were back then. And I remember that very painfully because I was in city government at the time. I did lead a department, and we had to make a lot of sacrifices. But this one is so different than then. And it's much more brutal because it's impacting so many people. I just cannot believe the unemployment numbers and the lines at the food centers, the food banks, and it's just incredible to me that people are just hurting so much, and that I still see some of my colleagues not quite get it, that it's happening. That I think we're really going to have to kind of lock arms with people. I'm saying that just visually, but not physically, and just make sure they truly understand what's going on around the country, and put the programs in place, like a major works program, so people can have jobs, and we can work on infrastructure, do some of the things we needed to do anyway. But this is a good time to do it so that we can provide the jobs that will hold families together.
And on that front, I have two questions on this. Is there anything to be done legislatively on behalf of the state of Texas on the oil situation? And is there any sympathy in a Democratic-controlled Congress for that scenario?
Well, I know there was some talk about that, and I know that I think Lizzie Fletcher may have filed a bill and on that, and I think we're going to look at it, obviously, particularly for us in my district. But I'm not sure that we can get the kind of support that we need in the House. I know that there will be that kind of support in the Senate. So I think it's going to be one of those that's going to have a compromise. There is still a lot of sentiment, even for the loan borrowing, that fossil fuel companies should not be allowed to benefit from that. And, I, on the other hand, don't want payday lenders to benefit from that. So everybody has, an interest that they either want to get benefit or not get benefit. So those are things that we've got to work through. But I am very open to any solution that any of my energy stakeholders might present, because it is, for me, about protecting the jobs and protecting the economic vitality of our region and our state.
So for our viewers who are not familiar with your background, you've been an office holder since, I guess, the 80s. Is that correct? And you were in the thick of the second wave of feminism. And you were absolutely vital to delivering the state of Texas to former Vice President Joe Biden in the Texas primary. What is your reaction to the statements he made this morning regarding sexual assault allegations against him during his time in the Senate?
Well, first, I think he's handled it well in making a statement himself to try to present his side and to make sure that people understand that he knows that first and foremost, women have a right to be heard and should be heard, that women should be treated with dignity and respect, and that women have a right, just as anybody else, to feel safe in the workplace, safe from harassment or any intimidation or any bullying of any sort. So I think it's good that he did that, and he did it himself in his own words. So I really commend him for that. However, I do think that when women make their allegations, that they be heard and supported, but they also have to provide some sort of due process, if you will, to ensure that both sides can be heard. And in this case, the vice president is saying that if she did file a complaint, there should be a record, and that should be in the National Archives, not his library in Delaware, where some have suggested, and that it can be found. And he's asked the Senate official that handles those documents to do the search and present them to the public and to the media. So I think it's great that he's been very open. And I'm hopeful that this can get resolved, because there's so many issues here, and it really is about protecting and expanding on the Violence Against Women Act, and it's about making sure that women always feel safe. And I certainly have always advocated that. So I hope to see where this goes. But I'm really, really glad that he was forthright. That he's asking for the records to be found, and then we'll go from there.
I'm going to ask you the number one question I get asked as a native Texan. In the presidential contest this fall, is Texas in play? And given how expensive it is to advertise in the state, do you anticipate the Democratic apparatus will make major investments?
Well, I do think Texas is in play, and I do think that Texas is in a very good play for Democrats in Texas. As you know, it's always been in play for Republicans. And I think the last poll that I saw that showed Biden ahead at 49-44, I believe it was y'all's poll, was it? Recently, I think it was last week, is very encouraging. And I do think that we will make investments in Texas. And you're right, media is very expensive, but what we're doing today digitally and the new landscape for retail politics is so changed that I think that it's almost going to be a better game for us in that it's less expensive to do digital ads than it is to do the commercial network ads. So I think we're tend to be better at organizing from the bottom up, and this is what we're going to have to be doing. I think the other side can no longer just depend on the major network TV ads because people are using so many other mediums, and I frankly think that the Democrats, especially that some of the voters that we need at the table, are better at that than the Republicans are.
So I want to look back, and I was thinking about your tenure. I saw you sworn in. You were sworn in during a shutdown. You played a major role in impeachment. You were essentially a prosecutor of the president before the Senate. And now we're in a pandemic, so it's been quite a freshman term. When you look back specifically on impeachment, how does that look, given how much has happened since then? Is that as historical as it felt at the time? What role do you think that's going to play, if any, going forward toward the election or just in American history?
Well, first of all, when people ask me about impeachment now, I just have to kind of wake up, right? Because it just feels like it was so long ago. Because you're right, it's been a very, very monumental year for all of us who started last January. It was a historic class, as you know, most women in Congress. There were so many firsts. But then we immediately went into the shutdown, biggest shutdown, longest shutdown. And just when we thought we were going to escape that, because they sit on judiciary, then we got involved with all the impeachment investigation, the impeachment trial. And just when I thought I had a break from that, then I was named a manager. But all that just seems so distant because this pandemic is so real. It's just impacting so many people, so many. It's like I don't know anybody who doesn't have somebody unemployed or sick or still trying to find a mask now. So it's like it just almost doesn't matter anymore. But I'm going to say this. I did another show earlier this week. And it was mentioned, somebody said, well, the problem we have now is that this president is just thinking about his campaign and not about the pandemic. This president is thinking about all the contracts for his friends and all the bank loans for his friends and not the rest of the country. This president is not following the Constitution. And I just kind of listened to it and I thought, oh my God, I think those were my arguments during the impeachment trial one of the nights that I was up at the podium. Because again, this pandemic is showing people that the true person that the president is, and he's someone who does think he's above the law, someone who does think he can just sign an executive order and stop all immigration coming in. He does think he can do an executive order for everything these days. So I think it kind of underscores some of the points that we were trying to make and made successfully, I might add, during the impeachment trial. But that's the only time I really have remembered the impeachment trial during this whole time was when somebody was arguing his violation of the Constitution and thinking of his campaign before the people. And I thought, wait a minute, that sounds like what I said, 3 or 4 months ago. But, we'll recover. I'm convinced. We've weathered many storms. This is another one. This country will come together and we will beat this thing. People just need to be patient and do what they need to do at home. And we should stop at nothing to make sure that we have a test for everyone that needs one, that it'd be free, that we do the tracing and ultimately find a treatment that's open and free to everyone.
So my last question for you.
Okay.
There is so much misery out there. There are so many difficult things. But is there anything out of this whole pandemic situation that has been good in your life? For me, I didn't realize children lived in my neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and they're out playing like it's the 80s. And so is there any one thing that has changed in a good way amid this that you may keep going and doing that when things go back to normal?
Well, I think for me, it's probably more use of technology because, as I said earlier, I've got a desktop here at home. I don't know if you can see it; it's right behind me. But I'm used to just opening email, printing some things. The staff sends me things that come over the weekend. I print them. But now, look at me. What is this, Skype? And I do Zoom and I do Teams and I do this. And I never would have done any of that before. And I think that it's not just me. I think all employers, so many people are doing these things. And I think we're finding that it does work. Video conferencing does work. All these teletown halls do work. I've done like 8 teletown halls that we've done our own. And then I've done 2 jointly, one with Univision in Spanish, and I did one with HTV and KHOU. We're working on one with Telemundo. And it works, and you get such a wide audience, and people feel good about being able to see and actually talk to someone on the phone that seems so far away in Washington. Because we do in-person town halls, but the districts are so big, you've got to do so many all over. But this is one way that we can reach the whole district in one town hall at the convenience of their own home. So people are liking them. We're getting really good response, and I think some of the technology and the way of doing things is going to stay, and it will for me. There's challenges still for me, but I'm getting used to it.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and to talk to Texans. And thank you all so much for joining in. And thank you to everyone who has supported today's event. To help us continue hosting events like this one, you can donate to our nonprofit newsroom at texastribune.org/give. Have a good day, rest of your day, everyone, and take care.